Hello and welcome to another hardware unboxed behind the scenes video. Bit of a change this week. I'm not sitting in front of the camera this time, but I'm in fact behind it to take a look at this thing. Something way too big to put into my normal frame that you would have seen. So this is a slider, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about sliders and how we get some of our B-roll captured today using this particular device here, and exactly what it does, how it works, and whether this particular one is any good. So if you guys are interested in sliders and all that sort of thing, yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about how the B-roll is made around here at Hardware Unboxed. So yeah, well, where do I start? I guess let's talk about B-roll. So when we're making a video, we don't want to give you guys boring static shots where we're just sitting here, or let's just say we're over here, and we want to get you some B-roll of this BB-8. We don't want to just make all the shots like this. We don't want to make it so that every single time you're just seeing a static shot in position, or maybe I'll move it around here for the next shot, and then maybe I'll get one up here for the next shot. You know, that's not very interesting. So the first thing you can do with B-roll shots is sort of introduce a bit of motion. So one of those might be panning, which, you know, I'm only doing it handheld here, but this is the sort of motion that you get. So you pan it from side to side, or you might see you pan it up and down. So you might do this. And that is something that can be achieved with just a tripod head. So once you get a tripod head on it like this, which is the Manfrotto whatever, I don't really remember the serial number of this, but basically once you have these two functions available to you, let's just unscrew both of them. It's very easy. We can just turn it side to side like this and pan up and down on a tripod. But again, that still limits you a little bit in the terms of things that you can do with B-roll. You've only got two axes of motion. You can only show movement from side to side, and you can only show movement from up to down, which isn't super interesting either. So what you can do to further improve B-roll, something that I've been experimenting with and something that Steve's had at his disposal for quite some time, is this slider technology. So in addition to having the pan tilt functionality like this, with the slider you can also just move along this one particular axis, which then gives you a range of functionality. You know, you might have seen some of my videos looking at monitors, for example. You can have the slider move along like this and tilt and turn at the same time, so that, you know, the device is always, whatever you're shooting is always positioned in the center, but then as you're moving along like this and, you know, moving the tripod head with it as well, that you're getting different angles and different unique things. So for example, going back to our BB-8 example here, rather than simply tilting and turning like this, with the slider you can actually do things like this, which gives you, as you're sort of moving around the frame like this, you can sort of get unique and interesting perspectives. Or you could just move it along like this, or you could say move it and turn it like this, or you could do it like this. And when you get all these combinations of movements available to you, panning and tilting and moving around objects and going on weird angles, and all that stuff is possible once you have this combination of tools, and it makes for some really interesting shots, and sort of expands upon our B-roll and allows us to continue to make each shot interesting and provide cool things. One of the cool things you might have seen with laptops, for example, is that, let's just say this is the front of the laptop here, and we wanted to show you guys, say, how it looks on the side profile within the same shot. Well, we can simply use the slider like this, move around, and there you go. You can get that same shot within that one shot, a smooth fluid motion between the two things, just to give you guys two unique angles of a product within the same shot, and I think that looks pretty good. So those are the kind of things that you can do with this particular device here. And what makes this one cool, well, I guess let's start first. One thing that sliders, you know, it can be difficult to do with the slider, especially when using it manually, is getting smooth motion along the tracks. So when you're moving it, you know, especially in a manual mode, with fluid heads like this one, which have a bit of resistance in them, even though these are manual, just because of the way that the resistance within the head works, you can get really nice smooth panning and tilting motions. As you can see here, all these motions are super smooth and super nice and have a bit of resistance to them, so that you're not going to get any stuttering in that movement. But with a slider like this, it's much harder to get that resistance in it nicely and working well, so that you're getting a nice smooth, you know, pan. And, you know, if you, in addition to using the slider, trying to tilt and turn at the same time as moving it, it's quite difficult. So one thing that, you know, you can use these days is an electronic slider, and that's basically exactly what we've got here with this control module. So let's get the control module, and we'll plug it in to the, using this handy, phone cable, or Ethernet cable, I think it is. So we plug that in, we turn this on, and it starts to power up. And then basically with this control device here, as you can see, I can move the tripod head without having to actually touch it, which is great. It means I can move it back and forwards and get really nice and smooth panning and tilting at the same time. It basically means that I can, normally I'd be using this in my other hand to this, but I could essentially just set this to move and then use this and just focus on the tilting or panning motion, so that all of the motion in the translation on the slider is done electronically, and I can focus on getting really smooth and stable shots by just moving the head. And that gives a lot of advantages in terms of, making these shots really, really smooth and making sure that you guys are not getting a super handheld feel by some of the B-roll shots that we get. So this is one of the key tools that we use, both Steve and I use. I think Steve might have a slightly different setup to me here, but certainly we both use these particular tools to get some of the interesting shots. This particular slider is 1.2 meters long. It's a Canova K7 slider, and so far I've been really happy with its sturdiness and performance and everything like that, especially with this added electronic kit, which you can see here. We'll go into a few more details on what this can do in a moment, but basically you can see here it just gives you smooth motion throughout the entire range of movement. So when I put the Blackmagic camera on the top, I can do a whole bunch of pretty interesting stuff and get nice smooth B-roll shots for you. And this is how some of those shots end up happening. So if you've been watching our videos recently, you're wondering, how did that B-roll shot come about? It's almost certainly a combination of movements that I've been talking about from this slider system with the electronic abilities. The other things that this slider can do, you might have seen these things on the end here. Basically, the slider can be detached from the tripod, and you can sort of unfurl these into legs. Don't quite remember how. I think I tightened them and everything, but yeah, these do come apart into legs like this, so you can sit it on a desk and have it flat and supported from both ends. But that is one of the things that you can do with this particular tripod or particular slider, the Canova one. Some sliders, this is often a problem with the sliders, is in this particular mechanism here. You can see the ball bearings there. You can get a bit of front to back movement, so that when you've got a camera on here and a lot of the weight's at the front and you're trying to move it, you can get this sort of up and down motion on these heads. But so far this one has been rock solid for me, no movement in there whatsoever, even though I have quite a heavy tripod head that could potentially loosen up that over time. No such issues, and so there's no concern about rocking back and forward and giving unwanted judder when I'm doing it. So I think getting the K7 version of this slider, which is the top of the line slider that they offer, has been really good. One of the other things that is important is stabilizing the tripod on, or stabilizing the slider on the tripod legs. You'll see that obviously if you have a single point of contact here, if you have all the weight of the camera down here, then the whole thing is going to start rocking and tilting and trying to tip over, and that could cause a lot of damage. So this is one of the attachments that you can get for it, which is basically just an additional stability arm. You can use two of these, but I found that one is perfectly adequate, and basically just attaches here and provides that extra bit of stability. So when you sort of look back and you see the whole setup as a whole, it looks kind of strange because one side's got this stability arm on it, but it works well and seems to stabilize the camera setup as a whole, and again allows for the smooth and stable shots, because that's the key thing that we're trying to do with a lot of our B-roll, keep it smooth and stable. So the other thing that this thing can do, so let's see if it'll ever focus. Bloody autofocus never works, does it? So this actually has a number of features that you can see here. We've got it's basically two different modes. We've got a live motion mode and we've got a time-lapse mode. So with the time-lapse mode, you can actually set various different things. This is you're shooting, say, still photography, and you want to make sure that you've got really nice time-lapse photography. You can set these intervals and things to move the slider just a small increment for each of the photos that you're taking, and you can even hook it up using a port on the top of this device. You can hook that directly into your camera so that this device will move the slider slightly and then sync it and take a photo with your camera, which is kind of cool. The other thing it's got is just live motion functionality. It's got 2 modes. You can have an auto mode, which basically just loops a certain amount or goes from point A to point B in a certain duration, depending on what things you set. So that's good for repeating shots. But the main mode that I use is the manual mode. And the cool thing about this slider compared to some automated camera sliders is the fact that it can be done, you can change the speed. So right now at 95%, I can crank that down to, and this autofocus is really bugging me, but sorry guys, but best I can do right now with it struggling. Yeah, you can turn it down and turn it up, which can change how quickly it moves along the slider, which is really key for getting different types of shots with it. The other thing you'll notice is this control device just has a big old battery on it. This powers the slider and everything, all powered by this one device. So it's not plugged in to the wall or anything. It's all just powered by the Sony batteries. As I was talking about in the Blackmagic review, these Sony batteries are really handy for all sorts of things, and I can get hours and hours and hours of sliding out of this thing with just this one battery on it. So yeah, basically this is the new Canova system, actually, the new Canova electronic slider system that we use here, new for 2019, and so far it's been working really well in terms of getting those B-roll shots. So yeah, that gives you a bit of a behind the scenes look into how those B-roll shots are done and sort of the tools that we use. And it can be a lot of fun to go around and just move the slider around and do all sorts of fun stuff. And so yeah, it can be lots of fun. I'll just turn that off. In contrast to the boring old A-roll tripod, which is just a teleprompter on a tripod. How boring. Everyone wants to see the slider in action and have a bit of fun playing around with that. So yeah, that's basically how a lot of our shots are done from a tripod and movement perspective. And yeah, we hope that you guys have been enjoying some of those B-roll shots, because all the setup is, I think overall, when you factor in the tripod, the slider, the head, and everything else, it's a few $1,000s worth of gear there, I believe. Not quite sure on the exact figures in terms of what this sort of setup would cost, but certainly these sort of things are not cheap. This tends to be the way with a lot of quality camera gear. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon as always, and I hope you have been enjoying this behind the scenes video extravaganza. We've got a few more things planned to do, so stay tuned for the next couple of videos.